Alright guys, so in the last video we created our route for the post request to API profile, which is to create and update a user's profile. Now before we test it or anything, I want to add our custom validations. So we're going to go into the validation folder, create a new file called profile.js. Alright, and in here it's going to be similar to these other ones we created. Let's actually just copy the login.js just so we have kind of a starting point, because we're going to want to bring in validator, we're going to want to bring in our custom isEmpty method that we created, and we're just going to change this now to validate profile input. Okay, it's going to take in data, we're going to initialize an errors object, and then anything that is going to be required we want to make sure we add here, because again, the validator, this is empty, it only takes in strings. So if they don't submit something in a form to our server, like let's say the handle, which is required, it's not going to come in as an empty string. It's going to come in as null or undefined. So what this is doing is making sure that if it is null or undefined, then it's going to get set to an empty string, and then we can check it with the validator.isEmpty. Okay, so remember our required fields, we have handle, so we'll check data.handle, not jandle, and right here handle, so that'll be set to an empty string if it's empty, and our isEmpty checks for undefined, null, it checks for empty objects, and so on. We also have status. I'm just going to control D twice and then status, and then let's copy this line down and let's do skills, which was also required. Alright, so we have that. Now I want to make sure that the length of the handle is between 2 and 40, so I'm actually going to just get rid of these, and let's do if. Okay, now remember to do if not validator.isLength, and we're looking at data.handle, not comma, data.handle, and then remember for the isLength it takes in a second parameter, which is an object with the min, which will be 2, and the max, which will be 40. Okay, and then in here, whoops, in here we want to then do errors dot handle equals handle needs to be let's see, yeah, handle needs to be between 2 and 4 characters. And then the handle is also required, so I'm just going to copy this, and I'm going to say if validator dot, we want to get rid of the not and say isEmpty data handle. We don't need this. So if it's empty, we still want it to be in the handle of the errors, and we'll just say profile handle is required. Okay, next thing we want to look at is status. Status is required, so we'll go ahead and copy this, and we'll just change this to status. And it'll be errors status. And we'll just say status is, or status field is required. Alright, and then let's do skills. Skills is required, so we'll do that. Okay. Now, those are the required fields, but we also have fields like website, all the social media. Those aren't required, but we want them to be formatted as URLs, and we can do that with validator.isURL. So we're first going to check to see if it's not empty, because I don't want, if we don't check to see if it's not empty, it's going to give us the URL error even if it's not there, okay? But we want it to, we don't want it to have to be there. So we're going to say if not is empty, then let's pass in data.website. So if it's not empty, then we want to do our validator check. So then we want to say if not validator dot is URL, and we're looking at data.website, then we want errors dot website equals not a valid URL. So does that make sense? Hopefully it does. We're checking to see if it's not empty, because it's not required. It can be empty, but if it's not, then we want to check to make sure it's a URL. All right, we're going to do the same thing with all of the social networks. So what do we have? I think we have 5 of them. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So under website, let's look at Twitter or YouTube. And change this, YouTube. It'll be errors.youtube. And it'll just say not a valid URL. Okay, we'll do the same thing here. Yeah, we'll just change all these to Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram. All right. So I think that's pretty much it for the profile validations. Okay, make sure you have this here as well. We're returning all of our errors, and it'll be valid if the errors are empty. Okay, so we'll save that, and let's go back to our profile route, which is API profiles.js. Go to our post that we did in the last video, and we're going to do the same thing that we did with validating the users. So we're going to, just give me 1 second. All right, so let's go right above where we did the get fields. And we want to use a little destructuring here. We want to get errors and is valid. And we want to take that from our validate profile input function, which we haven't brought in yet. We'll have to require that. And that gets passed in the request.body. Okay, so all the form fields that are submitted. And then we just want to check that validation by saying if is not valid, or if not is valid, then we want to return any errors with 400 status. So we'll say return res.status 400.json, pass in those errors. Okay, and that's it. So basically we just need to do this at the beginning of anything that we're trying to validate. Now let's bring this in right here, this profile input. So we'll go up to the top here, and we'll go right here. Let's say load validation. We'll say const validate profile input equals require, and that's going to come from, we're going to go out twice into validation / profile. All right, so we should be all set to test. So let's go to Postman. Now we're logged in we have our authorization header, which it hasn't been an hour yet, so it should still work. In fact, if I send, we still get the no profile. Good. Now let's go to I guess I could delete the register. That's all said and done. We already have some users registered. So let's create a new tab and let's make a post request to HTTP localhost 5000 / profile or I'm sorry, API / profile. And that's the route to actually create a profile or update a profile. So if let's just send, see what happens. We get unauthorized because we don't have our authorization. We don't have our token, which verifies our login. So let's go to headers, authorization, and let's grab our token from this tab. Paste that in and send. And there we go. So handle is required, status is required, and skills is required. Okay, and this is happening because of that validation file we created. So let's go ahead and go to body. Let's choose the form URL encoded. Let's add a handle. Who am I logged in as? John, or I know I had 2 users. I think it's John that we're logged in as. I could actually go to the current. If I were to go to the route we created, which was, you guys don't have to do this, I just want to make sure who I'm logged in as. So it was users / current, and let's put in authorization. Okay, so we're logged in as John Doe. So let's go back to the tab where we're creating our profile. Go to our body, and for the handle, I'm going to say John Doe. If I try to send that, okay, we could just get the status and skills is required. So for status, let's say developer. In our front end, this will be a select list. If we send that, we get that. Okay. So now for skills, let's do a CSV. We'll say HTML, CSS, JavaScript, PHP. All right. Now, if I send this, this should work, but it'll create a very minimalistic profile. But let's just try it. So we'll say send, and there we go. We get our profile back. Now, notice that the stuff that we didn't include, like bio, website, company, it's not here. It's not going to be blank. It's just not going to be here, which is it's what we want. Yeah, you can see the handle is here, the status, the skills is now an array, okay, because of that logic that we added. Now, this same route we can actually update our profile with. So I can just go ahead and add to this now, and let's say we want a company. So let's say we work for a company called EduSoft. If I go ahead and send that, there it is, company EduSoft. Okay, so we can use this to create profiles and update. If I wanted to add, let's say, a website. Now, this is, I'm going to show you something. This is where the error should come in if this isn't a URL. So if I just say EduSoft and we send, not a valid URL. Okay, so it's not required, but if we do put it, it has to be a valid URL. So let's change it to http www.edusoft.com, send, and there we go. So now our website is there. If we want to add a social network, let's add Twitter. HTTP, we'll say twitter.com/John Doe. And send, and there it is. And you can see it actually gets added to the social object. If I were to add Facebook, http facebook.com/John Doe and send. There it is. It gets put into the social object because that's how we constructed it in our model. Okay, your model is very important. That's the map of your data. All right, so we've done quite a bit in this section so far. We're now able to create our profile. We're also able to update our profiles, and we also have our validation. And now let's go back. Since we have a profile, let's go back to the route where we're checking to see if we're checking to get our profile data, because before we didn't have one. Let's go ahead and send, and there it is. Now we can get our profile. And if you want to look at MongoDB, let's go ahead and go to our Dev Connector database. I just have to log back in. And we have two collections now, users and profiles. Now there's two users, there's Brad and John Doe. We didn't create a profile for Brad, okay? So he doesn't have a profile. So if we look in profiles, there's only one document, and that's John Doe's profile. And that's exactly how this is supposed to work. All right, so hopefully you guys are understanding what's going on here. One thing I want to do before we go is, if we look at our profile, you don't see, we have the user ID here, but you don't see the avatar, and you don't see the name or the email. I actually don't want the email to show on the profile because these are going to be public. But we do want the avatar and the name. So what we have to do is go back to, we don't have to do anything different adding the profile. It's just fetching it, which is this route here. All we have to do is go to our find, or find one, sorry. We're going to go right above the dot then, and we're simply going to do dot populate. Okay, because since we basically connected our user collection to the profile inside the model, and just to show you what I mean, it was the first one we did here, this right here, we're able to populate fields from users into their response. Okay, so let's say populate, and we want to populate from user. And then we can put either just one field here, but since we want two, we're going to put an array. And we want the name, and we want the avatar. Okay, so let's save that. Let's go back to Postman, and let's refetch our profile. And there it is. User is now an object with the ID, the name, and the avatar. So that's now included in our profile. All right, guys, so that's going to be it for this video. In the next one, we have some more routes to create. We want a route that we can get the profile from the handle, because right now we can just get the currently logged in user's profile. That has to do with the token, but we want to be able to go to profile/Brad Traversy or John Doe, whatever the handle is. We also want to be able to get the profile by an ID, so kind of an unfriendly SEO method that we'll use internally. We also want to get all of the profiles. We want to be able to get an array of profiles. So that's what we're going to start to get into next.